How Do You Spirit podcast. And today my special guest is Jacqui.
Hello everyone. Thanks for having me, Laura.
You're welcome. I'm so excited to talk about this because this is something that I didn't know anything about this at all.
Okay.
And so when I found out about it, of course, I scheduled a session with you. A friend, myself and a friend did. And so tell us what it is that you do, Jacqui.
Okay, this is a good question. So I do craniosacral therapy, and it's sort of, it's kind of an umbrella term, right?
Yes.
What we're doing is, everyone who doesn't know about it probably has gotten a little bit somewhere in their past if they've gotten a massage, because mostly massage therapists will learn this as like another modality.
Okay.
But it's more like a cross between acupressure
Okay.
and energy work, I would say, on the body simultaneously. And so usually when clients or people come in for their session, they'll be fully clothed, lie on their back, and then we start kind of working mostly around the head, but we sort of work along the spine, but we also work along the body, and what we're gently feeling for is your body has a respiration. And it almost feels like as if I would say the closest analogy would be if you're at the beach and you watch a wave come in to shore and then you watch it kind of go away.
Yes.
That's what your body does. I think that's why people love the beach and it's so calming, is because your body actually has that kind of similarity.
That makes so much
and
sense.
so your body has a body respiration. And so it kind of folds in and then it gently folds out, kind of exactly how you would see a wave come on the beach and then go away on the shore. And so when we are working, we're kind of just helping your body, really. So if there's any restrictions or there's places where it's stuck, we're going to help your body try and release and go back to its normal kind of rhythm. And we can feel that all over the body. And in craniosacral terms, we call it the cerebral spinal fluid.
Okay.
Because it's kind of moving in its wave-like pattern from the head down to the spine and gently up.
Okay.
So most craniosacral therapists will start at that point, but beyond, we all kind of fork off in the road is what our little specialties are within it.
Awesome.
Okay.
So, and what do you do for your day job?
My day job's a little different. My day job is a little bit more on the very medical side. So
Yes.
I actually am by trade a certified nurse, midwife, and a women's health nurse practitioner. So
Wow,
I
that's so
delivered babies
awesome.
for a bunch of years, and then I no longer catch babies, but now I do the women's health part. So I see clients or patients in clinic and deal with kind of women's health conditions. But the craniosacral is really kind of my fun evening, nighttime job, I would say.
Right,
but
right.
Yeah, really kind of where I'm going towards.
Do you feel like that part of it helps you in the other side with the craniosacral?
It does, and vice versa, because of having the knowledge of the body. It kind of crosses a little bit over to the craniosacral. So when I talk to, clients, I'm like, oh yeah, I think it might be this or this that's kind of showing up in your session today. And then vice versa, when I'm in patient visits, I'll get an empathetic feel in my body of where something is happening for them.
Yeah.
And that has happened to me more than one occasion. For instance, when I used to deliver babies, I would just bolt out of bed upright in the middle of the night and then be like, I'm awake. And then I would be like, I don't know why. And then somebody would call me within an hour and say, and I would have to go.
And you would have to go.
Yes.
Oh my
Or
gosh.
if I got called on site or I was at the hospital, but I would go into the room. And as soon as I felt myself having like a bowel movement urge, I would tell the nurse, please admit her. She's getting ready to go. So I would feel it before, like I would have like triaged or kind of checked in on the patient.
I am so,
but
my gosh.
it never clicked with me like at the time. So,
Okay.
Yeah, so that was interesting.
I feel like your intuition
Yes.
and spirit, wow.
Dialed up a bit. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So I was like not so smart to pay attention to all these things. I was
you're like,
that's fun, interesting, and when you don't really when you're not aware of it, you don't look at it as something that you've got.
Right.
But we actually all have it.
Exactly.
We're born with it. And then as we kind of get into life and circumstances, you sort of kind of dial that down a little bit so that you can be in life and experiences. But we all have it, and it's always that thing you don't
maybe want to listen to, right?
Or
you
question,
yes,
right?
Or question.
Yes,
or
absolutely.
You think about somebody and then they call you like an hour or a
Mm-hmm.
day later.
Yep.
It's all that stuff. It's all kind of inherent.
Yeah.
So for a lot of years, I thought it was all just my stuff. So when I was little, I used to be sick all the time. I was chronically sick. I was
Oh no.
like a child who was sick, baby who was sick, growing up in a household where I was just feeling everything that was going on. And I
Oh my
didn't realize it
goodness.
until years later that
You weren't really sick then. You were
No.
just getting.
I was having the physical sickness, like I'd have ear infections or flus or
Uh-huh.
bronchitis or just very respiratory things that were chronic and all the time. So I was having physical stuff, but it was definitely coming from my environment with my family. That was sort of all the stress and all the stuff that was coming up with them. I would sort of feel it in my body and it would just come out. But I didn't know
Oh my
that
gosh.
until years and years and years later when I had a friend kind of point it out to me and I was like, gosh.
Okay, so let's hear that story
Yeah.
about the friend.
So I have a really, really incredible friend. We went to nursing school together and we were just, I would say, when she just came to visit me. This is years later after nursing school. She came to visit me. We were having a weekend. We went to get some lunch. And after lunch, we got in the car and she goes, I think I feel a little nauseous. And at this time, she'd already been diagnosed with cancer.
Okay.
And had started treatments. And for her treatments aren't aggressive. So she gets a monthly shot and then they monitor it that way.
Yes.
So we were in the car and she goes, I think it was lunch. I don't feel good. I'm feeling like a little nauseous. And I, before this, was doing a little bit of energy work on this, just kind of on the side, learning what it was, doing quantum touch practice, doing other healing stuff. And I said, well, let me just do some energy work on you. And I just like placed my hand over onto her. And then weirdly, I was like, can I ask you a question? And she's like, yeah. And I said, and I didn't realize, I got out of the car actually. I said, what do you want to do? Do you want to go home? Do you want to like lay down? Or I have a couple of errands? She goes, let's just run your errands. It doesn't matter where I'm sick at this point. If it's in the car or at home, like I'm just going to feel like this. So
right.
I said, okay. So we started driving and I was in the car and I was feeling nauseous too. That's kind of how it started. I said, oh, maybe it's something we ate because I feel kind of sick too.
Okay.
And then I got out of the car, ran an errand, and in the store, the symptoms went away in a minute. And I was like, oh, maybe I just got up and walked around. Like, I feel better.
Yes.
And then I got back in the car a few months later
and it
everything
came back.
And then we were at another place and I went to run another errand, jumped out of the car, and I was in the store and everything left again. It was like magnified all the symptoms I was feeling.
Okay.
And then it all dissipated in the store. Like I almost felt embarrassed. I was like burping and like releasing some gas. And I was like, okay, I gotta get out of the store. I feel inappropriate. And then I was like, this is so weird. So I get back in the car and I kind of started doing some energy work. And I said, can I ask you a very strange question? And I said, I'm feeling very, very nauseous and like it wants to come up, but it's kind of stuck. I'm feeling a little bit of a sensation or a pain right about 3 or 4 inches to the left of my belly button, but it feels like it's directly pulling down into like intestinal area. And then I have a very strange pinpoint pain on the back of my right shoulder blade. And she kind of just looked over me and she goes, I don't think I've ever told anyone how I experience exactly what I'm feeling right now.
Wow.
And so her and we've known each other for so long, we just kind of dived in. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that I had this or could feel this.
Yeah.
And so it kind of had led forward. So I was able to kind of talk with her about it and then do some work with her. And then she kind of opened that whole wheelhouse. And I had to kind of look back and inventory my life and realize,
be like, oh my gosh.
this is what happens. So when I think it's me having a headache or a shoulder pain, I always thought it was mine.
Yeah.
So now I have to check in with myself. And sometimes it's somebody who sits next to me or nearby.
So that's so wonderful, but also
I know. It's like a curse, right? You're like, oh, this is great, but it's like not great.
Maybe not. Yeah.
So I have to I have to ask a lot of like internal questions and get in tune. And now I've learned some really good ways. Like when I get in a session, like with you, for instance.
Yes.
When I got to your session, I'll start in a certain way where I'll say, I'll check in with myself and then I'll see what's kind of my inventory first.
Okay.
And then I'll say, I'm now in this person's space. Thank you for letting me share what this person would like to share with me, and overlay and kind of show physically what's going on, or emotionally or spiritually. Please show it in my body as the mirror. So that's why I'll ask you kind of notice some yes or no questions right at the beginning.
Excuse me.
You're okay? No. I'll ask you, and then that gives me, if I'm going to do a craniosacral session that's more about the physical ailments, then I have a blueprint of where to go.
Yeah.
And you're telling me, your body is telling me, but I'll feel it. And the way I feel it sometimes is if it's like a hot or cold sensation in my body, it's actually emotional for you. There's something emotional.
So you've been able to identify the feelings you get and what that means.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's like building vocabulary.
Yeah.
So everyone has their own language in the translation. And I never knew that before. So like, for instance, I know you've had Taco as a guest.
Yes.
She's got her own vocabulary. So if she sees like, she said something that she sees something and she knows that's her correlation for like Hawaii, right? Whereas like, for instance, let's say I see a white flower. Maybe for me that means funeral, but for you it means like birth or celebration, right?
Yes.
So the translation is what's the intriguing piece when anyone goes to see a spiritual person. Of course. Is the vocabulary is what's a little bit difficult. So when people say, oh, I didn't think that was for me, that message, or that piece of it. Then we get into a place where, okay, I'm building my vocabulary, and maybe what is my vocabulary, what I would translate it would be different for you.
Yes,
so sometimes
absolutely.
bringing up the piece is kind of interesting. So then I'll have that either a blueprint or a pathway. So if it's cold or hot, it might be emotional. Sometimes if I'm feeling all of a sudden a burst of almost anxiety in my chest, I will kind of know that person either is dealing with anxiety or panic attacks or stress in their life, especially to the point, like I'll get kind of a clog, like a congestion in my throat. And then I know they've been through something maybe grief-wise, and it hasn't released yet. So it will show up in me immediately, and I'll have people with head or sinus stuff where I'll have just sort of dripping out of one side of my nose. I've even had like where I've just teared and cried out of one eye. And then
my gosh.
Yeah, and I'm like, this is wild, and I'll have to kind of gently go into that session with that client, right? So it shows up very intriguing. If it's a physical pain, it might show up in me as like a dull kind of either soreness or pain, and or I might get like a vibration at that area of my body. And then, for instance, with you, I had a pinging sensation. And it was like somebody was taking their finger and flicking it at my shoulder and my elbow. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. So is that nerve pain, or is it something to come? So it can be really interesting. And then sometimes I'll get, my body will move in emotion really quickly. And then I'll ask someone, did you fall or did you twist something? And they'll kind of just waver me into that position. So I've had that happen with people too. The other thing that will come in is I had one client where she just had some interesting, like almost just on the back of her shoulder blades, it was like 4 spots that were just so restricted. It was holding in some emotion. And all of a sudden I got this image and asked her, did you have a near drowning experience at age 9? And like we talked about it after, and they said there was something going on with somebody there in the water that they didn't. She explained a little bit further, but I said it was very like childlike, but you almost drowned, and you've been holding that in your body.
Wow.
And it was something with like there was a boundary for you, and it came to me a little bit further that it was like a family member, and there was some sexual attention that she wasn't picking up on at that age, and it was but she was still holding it in the body, and that kind of came up. So we processed that like after the session.
So with your sessions though, is this a way for somebody to be able to heal, right?
Yes.
From emotional.
Yes.
I love it.
Yes, physical, emotional, spiritual.
Yeah.
So there's all different kinds of sessions. So like for instance, if somebody is very new to craniosacral therapy, I'll say, you know what? Let's just do a nervous system one.
That's what we did with me.
Yeah, so let's talk about, if you're okay.
Yeah, let's go into that.
And then we can go back to the other one you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, so I went to see Jacqui, and again, not having experienced this or really knowing even what it was. I mean, I was Googling before, like, what is this?
You're
anyway,
like, whatever you do, let's do it.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to try all the things.
Yeah.
So anyway, I went, and that's how you started the nervous system reset, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And it was so crazy because so you started at the bottom of my body, and when you would put your hands under me, I would get a really, not like hot, burn you hot, but warm to hot sensation where your hand was at. And when you got to like up higher, I started getting buzzy, I call it, the buzzy feeling, and I was getting the chills.
Yes.
And as you explained earlier with the ocean and the wave thing, I literally felt, well, I would feel the wave, but I felt like I was floating off the table.
Yes.
I told Jacqui, I said, I feel like you just could have picked me up and like shook me like a rag doll.
Yeah, like you probably felt weightless.
I did.
Like
I
you could
felt
have just done this and you would have been like, okay, you
Yes.
just lifted me right off the table and I'm
Yes.
floating right now.
Yeah,
And we
I
talked
was-
to, go ahead.
it was crazy,
Yeah.
but I was like, oh my gosh. And so the longer the session went on, I'm like, can I just be here forever? 'Cause
No, just please stay on the table. Yeah.
it was the most wonderful and amazing feeling I can honestly say I've probably had in my life.
That's amazing. That is amazing to hear that.
Really,
Yeah.
because I was, well,
Yeah.
of course, I believe in all of this, right? But it's so crazy because you don't know what to expect, and then you go do it, and it's like, oh my gosh, did that just really happen?
Yeah, like you don't know that you could feel that way. 'Cause
No.
I don't think that you, and we talked about it a little bit, so I'll
Yeah.
kind of talk about that now.
Yes, do.
Where that is one of the, there's so many ways we try to get that feeling. Like one of the ways we try to get it is falling in love.
Okay, yeah.
It's also almost like the closest feeling you can get to either like what people want to say source or higher power or
Yeah.
their God or religion or it's just like you're free from your body, and this is where I call it, it's like the body spirit, right? That your spirit's in the body and your body's the glove, but your spirit is like kind of inside the glove, right?
Yeah.
And it was probably the closest you could feel in your spirit body without feeling the glove. Like
Yes.
having almost a separate sensation of being like, oh, I'm like, probably people feel that like on their way to transitioning, right, towards death. It's
Yeah.
kind of like, oh, I'm like free of the body. And so to have that experience, you almost get a place of like, oh, I don't have to be bogged down by like a stress or anxiety or concern, and I have like the ability to get here even though I'm in my body most of the time, right?
Yes.
You have this ability to, and that's what your nervous system really is like your spirit being at its, you're kind of on the spirit side and it's calm, right?
Yeah.
Because, and then when you're anxiety and panic attack, it's like, it's almost like your spirit and your body are having a little tug of war, and that's why you're just like, I don't know, like what is happening in here? I don't want to be having all of this, right?
Right, yeah.
And so you were in a place where you didn't have to struggle to get there, like your anxiety or panic mode was like right at bay, no fight or flight response,
Right.
and you were just able to kind of settle into your spirit. And how nice is that, right? Like to get that feeling that we almost like never get. I think babies have it quite a bit because
I've never had it in my life, ever.
Yeah.
Never,
Yeah,
ever.
right.
And it's amazing.
I know. Or like people will say they feel it like when they're a little kid floating in the pool and somebody will like put their hands under them. If you've ever had that.
Yes.
That kind of
Yeah, that
you
is a...
kind of just feel like it's almost like you're trying to get to those points in your childhood where you felt like that.
Yeah.
Or like how the closest I've had to that was when like, oh my gosh, when we were kids, I think all my cousins and siblings would get a blanket, put someone in the middle and just like kind of throw you up into the air, and you would feel that lightness. So I think it's like we're always trying to get a little bit back there to know what that's like.
Yeah.
But to lift your body of all the
The outside
the
world.
outside noise, the stress that we live in, the chatter, the mind chatter that never goes away.
Yes.
And I think your mind was probably like the most quiet it ever was like after that. And you're just, your whole body, your whole face, just the way you were at the end of the session was just different. It was really different.
So with that being said,
Yes.
as I mentioned, a friend and myself did a session. And my friend, I was talking to her today, this morning on the phone, and she went to have an acupuncture treatment. And we used the same gal.
Okay. Was this after the session?
After the
Okay.
session. So she went, I think she said it was yesterday.
Okay.
And so she goes to our acupuncture gal, and she walks in the office, and she looks at her and says, "Oh my gosh, you look so different."
Yes, that's.
And she's like, "Wait, what? I'm the same. Like, I haven't done, anything different." But she goes, "You look different. You have different energy. You look rested."
Yes. So we actually talked about it after her session
Yes.
and made a joke. I think I was like, I was checking, how do you feel after the session? And I like people to lay in their body and just scan after the session, head all the way down, so you really kind of get to feel it, and then be conscious of like, what does that feel like, and can I get back to this, like before I go to sleep at night, can I get back to this somehow, right? And so when I saw her sit up from the table, I looked at her face, and her whole face just looked different, and I was like, oh, is this vacation? Someone said, like, you just look like you came out of vacation.
Right.
So
Yeah.
her whole face was so relaxed, it literally looked changed.
Yeah.
I was like, you kind of look, she looked different to me.
Yeah.
But I don't have
Well,
that much history, right? Just
yeah.
before and after.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, it seemed like you went on vacation, and you're at the end of your vacation, and here you are, just really relaxed. So there you go. There's
It was perfect when she told me that this morning. I'm like,
I love that. I love that.
yeah.
Okay, so that's good. It's good when other people point it out, because
And it was the exact same thing you told her.
Yeah. Yeah. She had a moment of like, oh, and we talked about that. Like, that's just the point of like putting yourself in the equation for self-care. And Craniosacral is a nice tool to allow, it's like an adjunct to other things going on.
Yeah.
So it really can just give you what you need, and it's what your body wants to give you or wants to release. So some people get a little nervous because they're like, no, I don't want too many things to come up, or like, all the things.
All the
like,
skeletons in the closet.
It's like, it's really what you're, right? All of them coming out whole full, which is funny because sometimes things will come up that during a session, right? So it's interesting because sometimes I'll get like, I had information for you at the end, right?
Yes.
And was like, oh, that's interesting. I don't know why this popped up, but one of your spirit guides popped up.
Yes.
And I got a very big visual about that. And
Yep.
brought it up, and you were like,
Yeah, that's him. Yep. She explained my main spirit guide to a T to me. I'm like, yeah, that's Rob. That's my
I'm like, why is there like a biker dude on a bike with like tabs on one arm? He's got the leather vest on, and he's like on the bike, kind of on the side, but in front of the pack, like very like. And you said, yeah, and I was like,
That's
That's on brand for her.
exactly. Right? Who else would I have for a spirit
guess,
guide? Like a hardcore biker dude. Come on now.
Yeah. So that was kind of great. That was great. And so I'll get that, or I'll get like images, or just information will come in, and it sort of just kind of downloads. It just comes in, like, and then I'll just either have images or like I'll see a fortune cookie, and it's like written on a fortune cookie.
Oh,
And
interesting.
it just depends how it comes in. Or some people have their own people in their little group that comes with them, and I'll be like, who is this German lady talking to me?
Yeah.
Who's like, do this, do that, get over there, do this. And I'm like,
giving you
okay,
directions.
yeah. She's like, loves you. She loves you. Like, I'll get that kind of a laundry list.
Yeah.
And, they'll respond and be like, oh yeah, that's so-and-so. So it is really, really interesting what comes through. So that's the intuitive piece. And so some people will have that. Some people work more like the fork in the roads for craniosacral are like either biodynamic or like biomechanical. So some people are like more body focused where, remember at the beginning I just asked you a bunch of questions?
Yes.
That I could spend a whole session just working on
those areas for you. Where you're having like a physical stiffness or tension or pain is usually a clog or congestion. It could be emotional. It could have been a trauma that kind of got stuck in there.
Yeah.
And you know, it when it's in there, it wants to come out.
Sure.
And so you might be feeling like, oh, that's why I was having
all this heat because it was like starting to dissipate out of the area, starting to come out of the body. So when people, that I think you and the other gal who got this session was like, wow, your hands were hot. And I was like, I'm touching them. I'm like, they're not hot. Nope.
They were. Yeah.
Like, the other gal was like, she got out of a sauna, was sweating on the back of her head profusely. And I was like, that's yours.
That's
You needed to get out. So
releasing something.
Yeah. What's in the body doesn't want to stay in there. It will, and we're I'm just me or whoever. We're just helping to help your body get that out.
Get rid of that.
Yeah, and so that's why some of the sessions can be physical related, where it's like, oh, you're having this pain. Well, let's kind of work with that. Usually what's behind it is like something emotional or something trauma related or a memory or something that's kind of held in there.
Yeah.
And then that's what's kind of, sometimes that will come up. Just depends what comes up for everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
I was having flashes too.
Interesting.
In my mind, and I can't remember all of them, but the one that stood out to me is I saw like it was almost like I don't even know how to explain it, like, you know, a totem pole face. I know this sounds so crazy, but
or the Brady Bunch. Remember the little?
yeah. The necklace.
It was like the necklace.
It was like almost like an Aztec face symbol of something that popped into my mind.
Okay.
And that's the one that I remember that was most permanent.
Interesting.
But I was having other things too kind of flashing through. And I'm going to have to work on that because I'm super curious. Like, what does that mean? What does that mean? And I'm also grateful for that session because now I have that feeling. I know what it feels like to be so connected, and I can try to work on getting myself back there during meditation and stuff.
Yeah.
Because who doesn't want to feel that good again all the time?
All the time. I know. You're like... It's indescribable, really, until you...
It is. You have to really experience it, because it is. It's...
And when you're little, you don't understand the gem of what that is.
Right.
Because, like, again, babies are so close to the other side. They feel it very often.
Yeah.
And which is why they're so kind of sometimes a little cranky when they come back here. Like,
no wonder. That My daughter Chelsea, as you all know, she moderates.
I was traumatized when I arrived.
She was my mom, her grandma. She would not even babysit her because she was so naughty. Nobody would tend her. Like, I'd take her here. Just can you watch her for a couple hours? Right. And they're like, can you come get her? And don't ask me again because she is naughty. She was just grumpy and fussy, and now she's like this little sweetheart thing. But she was. I kind of swore after I had Chelsea I wouldn't have any more. Yeah. Good thing we forget because I had 3 after that.
Every time.
But yeah, she was the most grumpy out of all of them. But that's so interesting.
It is. I feel like because your babies are so attuned to the other side. They're still like up until like the age 4 or 5. They can still you can ask them stuff. Like I had a friend where she was a midwife and she was in labor. But at one point, the labor kind of slowed down and it wasn't progressing. And she asked her daughter at like age 2, like, "Do you remember, when you were like in my belly and ready to come out?" And she's like, yeah. She goes, oh, what do you remember about it? She goes, well, I was stuck for a long time. And she's like,
Wow.
blown away because she had a couple other midwives with her. But I think they started kind of trying to talk to her like, hey, whenever you want to get out of whatever position you're in, that'd be great. Like, speed this along. But her daughter at age 2 could tell her. Like, I was stuck. And she goes, well, how did you get unstuck? She goes, someone told me. Someone said it. And so, okay, I did. It was like,
That's
they're
cool.
that connected. And then when they come in the side, like, you see when babies are born, like, I was always intrigued. I'm like, oh, that looks grumpy off the get-go.
Right?
Like a grimacing face.
The face.
And you're just like, oh, like,
Welcome to Earth.
welcome. How do you like this, like, body you just came into? And then it's, I think, a whole transition. I think some babies are kind of open for it. And some are like, oh, no, I really like that feeling that you experienced in your session. I want that.
Yeah.
So it's like a little harder transition.
That's
and so as we get
funny.
older, we forget. So it's amazing to be like adult and then be able to have that.
To
because
get
that's
back
really
there.
what it is. That's what everyone's sort of wanting when they like meditate or, or taking their quiet time or practicing whatever they're practicing. I think everyone's really trying to get to that without knowing like quite what it feels like.
Yes.
Right? Or who are the Buddhist monks, right? When they go to sit on, the mountain or,
Yeah.
I think that's what it is.
Well, we don't have anything to compare it to because,
Yes.
That's funny you said that because she didn't want to come out either. She was 2 weeks late.
Yeah.
I got induced.
Oh, boy.
And then she still didn't want to
She
come
was
out.
like, I am really
I'm
loving
just-
this jacuzzi and lighting, and everyone sounds really quiet in the background. And it's warm. Why would anyone want to leave that?
Right?
I like my comfort zone, I guess.
Yeah. And they ended up using the vacuum. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh,
yes.
yes.
So, yeah. Anyway, that's so
So
funny.
Chelsea, welcome.
Yeah.
But
That's so funny.
Well, I'm glad you got to experience that because I think
Me too.
some people, when they go to craniosacral therapy, I always tell people we're all like car mechanics. I mean, like everyone's got their specialty.
Yeah.
They have their focus. And I didn't know either. When I got my first session, I was like, what is this? And at the time, I think I was going through some like, it was like during COVID, we'd all quarantined. My group had gotten really tiny. I was experiencing like some depression. And then coming out, I just, the same thing. It was like, oh, what's this craniosacral thing? I'm going to go get that done, And I'd had a session before COVID and had taken a class, but it was like a different type of session where I think it was just working on physical, stuff in the body. And then I got one after COVID and was like, oh, what's this? And I was like, what you experienced.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, it kind of lifted my melancholy, my depression. I knew I could get out of depression. Having experienced that feeling was like, okay, I'm not stuck.
Right.
There's a way out.
I can get there.
Like, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I can get there. And then that's when I realized like craniosacral work can be so different for so many things. And so when people choose a craniosacral therapist, you kind of want to, understand like, well, what are you here for? Are you here for physical stuff? Are you here for, and you don't always have to know, but starting with some of the basics like a nervous system kind of session would be great. Or then after that deciding, do I want a physical, session to release some physical stuff, or there's also another type where it's like it's called somatic emotional release.
Oh, wow.
And that's a different session entirely altogether where we're using the rhythm to guide us, to tell us where there's something stuck in your body, but you're non-conscious or your body actually knows where it's stuck. So when people start talking, you're like, oh, it's this. And we're like, your body ain't lying. It's actually not that. Go back to what you were talking about before. So we'll ask questions. And you'll be in that sort of state where you're really kind of calmed down in the meditation state. And there's a simple dialogue that happens. And some people will either use an image. Some people will talk about something in the body. It's whatever your language is for you. Because some people are like, well, I just, want to make sure I want to feel safe. And I don't want to be overwhelmed with what comes up. But really it's about making those connections as to the non-conscious into the conscious, right? So you're sort of getting that information that's down below, but it just sort of really surfaces up. So when we're doing the craniosacral, the body won't lie. It will tell us where there's something to go look into. And then you'll just, as we're asking questions, you'll give some answers. And then what's happening is you're your non-conscious or your inner physician or whatever your inner wisdom is will give you the information. So then when you're coming out of the session, some people do, experience something and they're maybe emotionally releasing during the session. So it's, we hold a safe place and container for that to happen. And then also it can happen after the session. Or some people will leave the session and within the week or two be like, oh, I had all these aha moments, these connections that I didn't even know this was why this was occurring now in my relationship because it was connected to this, like it happened 15, 20 years ago. When I was like 9, I didn't know. And like just some really easy, like not over emotional where you get laden with it, but sort of like really wonderful, like connecting the dots. So it can happen in all different ways. So that's like a whole other area of craniosacral too.
Wow.
Yeah.
So much to
To
explore.
offer.
Yeah.
I know.
Oh, wow.
But I really love the nervous system one because it's such a really good one to start
So
with.
when you do that nervous system reset, tell me
What-
what that
what it-
helps with.
Yeah, so you probably felt, I would say, not only in that session, but I would say for within the week after, especially the first couple days, you were really like, I can manage stuff.
Yeah.
I can tackle maybe this list I want to do and it doesn't seem overwhelming, or I'm not having the severe mind chatter. It's okay that that's to the side, but I can have a little more energy to do this. So you're probably finding there's a little bit more of kind of groundedness in the week.
Yes.
Have you noticed that?
Yes.
Okay.
Most definitely.
So describe that, or how.
When you mentioned the mind chatter,
Mhm.
I don't have as much of that going on.
Yes, right.
I feel quieter
Yeah. Right. Okay.
up here.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I
Yeah.
feel quieter
Yeah. So it's
in my
really-
head.
Yeah. And so I feel like the week maybe that could be daunting ahead for most people.
Uh-huh.
It's almost like, oh no, this week wasn't hard.
Yeah.
It's like the way you can kind of maneuver through it. So it really is taking, for some people, the other analogy is like being in flight mode or like
Yeah.
fight or flight mode,
Mhm.
and then just taking the dial and turning it from like 10 down to like a 1, and then being able to manage a lot of things that maybe would have been a little bit harder to manage that week.
Yeah.
Maybe if you were going to have like, oh, I have this, and it turns into like an argument, having a way to go through where you're like, oh, this could just be a
This is
conversation.
easy. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's helpful in a lot of different ways.
I do feel like that too. That things are easier.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm typically not a really stressed person.
Yeah, I think
Or-
I've heard you in your
yeah,
podcast. You're like,
or
"I don't have
super anxious, but I do still feel it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. So it gives you a place to kind of manage. So I'll tell people after a session, I'll say, it's kind of really good place now to maybe like, if you don't journal, write some thoughts down.
Oh,
write
yeah,
down
that's
that,
a great
Write down
idea.
that image and then date it, and then maybe like see if something shows up in your dreams, or or something kind of shows up in the next week or two to kind of give you some clarity.
Uh-huh.
But again, it's looking at certain things, right? Your patterns. How did your patterns change day to day?
Right.
What shifted? And it's very helpful to see that, so like, oh, like I'll have people who don't make those connections right away, but you sound like oh yeah, I noticed this and this and this and all these pieces. So, and really, that's what the session's about, is to kind of help maneuver you through your life so that you can do all the other things.
Yeah.
So for some people who are doing a lot of like maybe body work, breath work, therapy work in their life, or having a difficult time, or have panic attacks or anxiety attacks, this is such a place to like be an adjunct to get you where you can go to the other things you need to get to, where you're like, well, I've been trying to do this piece for a long time. I haven't even been able to think about it, get to it, avoid a, procrastination or just whatever. It gives you like a little open pathway, like, oh, it's not so hard to get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense. It's amazing. So you are only in Salt Lake a few times a year.
I know. So
which really makes me sad.
I know. So I lived in Utah for a very long time, and this is my home base. It's always permanent for me. So I'll come back about 6 times a year for like 2 weeks at a time.
And I told her, you just plan on me, just let me know when you're coming, and I will be there.
Not a problem. We'll make it happen. And then I spend time in California. So with my day job, that brings me to California,
Yes.
and then I do my day job there. So I do my nurse practitioner of women's health, and then I do craniosacral work there through like
Okay.
a functional medicine clinic, and then I'll usually their clientele, and
Yeah.
I'll do work on that. But then here is just word of mouth, and when I come back, I'll get people in. you know?
Yeah,
So,
that's
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really wish you loved it.
I really want to do it now.
When you said that, I'm like, this one over here needs a session for sure.
Yeah.
I got some time before I leave. We can make it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you guys, I just can't stress you should try this for it. Wow. I don't even know what to say about it.
I know. It's exactly what you said. It's like
It's incredible.
yeah, it's something how you feel you didn't think you could ever get back to like this part of your life, or I think it's what we're all trying to get to in our day to day, where we talk about like the meditation, like I'm trying to meditate. I think like this is the feeling people are trying to get to. When
Absolutely.
They, like, meditate. It's like this feeling.
Yes.
And to know that you can grasp it, it's within your reach, is really a wonderful piece, because then people can use that. Like
Yeah.
for you, I think we talked about at night, a minute or two before you go to sleep.
Yep.
We talked about some ways you could try to get to that feeling again. It might, over time, you might find it a little harder to get to, but it will be so present for you for like the next few weeks that this is a place you have that can
And I
help
have
you.
done it.
Yeah.
Not to that
Yeah.
level, of course.
Sure,
but
no, but yes.
But
Yes,
yeah,
yeah.
I have been able to.
Yeah. So
And it's amazing. And
It's
it just makes you feel so relaxed. And because that first night,
yeah.
of course, I had to try that.
You're like, wait a minute, I gotta get back to this. Yeah.
And I generally sleep pretty well, unless Spirit likes to talk to me when I get in bed. But I slept so good that night. And the next night, I tried it again. But then I think, too, the connection with Spirit was way stronger. So then I had the chatter that night. The Spirit's wanting to talk to me. But that's fine. That's
okay.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're learning how to get there. It's like it's like relearning your software.
Yeah.
You just are relearning it. It's
Yeah.
been there, but accessing it. Yeah. And it's always more synergistic the more people you have to create that connection, so that you get there more so and can stay in it for longer.
Okay.
So that's also the beauty of like why we're interconnected and why we're around people, is you're trying to
Wow.
bring that a little bit closer to you. So that's really the pieces. We can all get there. Obviously, if you could get there 24 hours a day, you're done. You're enlightened. Move on.
Right.
Next place, please. But that's the beauty of having people or other people who are in the spiritual workers. Is you can kind of like. What's that word, like exponentiate it, or like, just magnify it.
Enhance,
for you.
yeah.
Enhance it for
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
And then you can kind of know that it's attainable. So,
Yes.
So you may not be able to get there all the time.
But I'll take it when I can
take
get
it.
it.
When you can get it.
Yes, I love it.
And then, I have a website.
Yes.
So if people want that, it's Release with Jacqui, and it's a Google site, so people can generally get a hold of me either like on Facebook or Instagram.
Okay,
and
so you have those platforms.
Yes, and I can obviously email it, and you can put it on your site. It's a Google site, so if that's easier to find, you just put Google site and Release with Jacqui, and then
Okay.
you'll find it right there.
It'll pop right
It'll
up.
pop right up. So
Yeah, we should share that on the website, our webpage, howdoyouspirit.com. I would love that. That's
Okay.
amazing.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else you want to add?
Yeah. I feel so honored and privileged to have people to do this with, right? So
Yeah, it seems like to me you're very clairsentient. So clear feeling, like that's your psychic ability.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some where there's some that kind of pop in and out every
Okay.
more. That's definitely the main one.
Uh-huh.
And the claircognizant kind of comes through at times too, and yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, For sure.
How fun.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you so much
Yeah.
again for taking your time is probably
yeah.
so precious when you're here because you have
it's
clients and
amazing.
stuff. So
Yeah.
thank you for coming, and
You're
I can't
welcome.
wait to have my next session.
Always.
I'm a couple 3 months away.
That's okay. We'll get you in.
Yeah.
We'll get you in.
Anyway, thank you everyone for joining us today. And again, you can go to the website, howdoyouspirit.com. We will put a link in
Sure.
there
That's
for
fine.
Jacqui's contact information. Or you
Yes.
can go to, what is your Facebook page and Instagram?
It's a little bit different. I haven't quite
Okay.
transitioned in yet. 'Cause
Okay.
It's Gwell, and it's for Get Well. It's like a little
Wow.
abbreviation of
Oh,
that.
cute.
So
I
it's
love that.
GWEL.
Okay.
And it's Gwell, Get Well. And
Okay.
that's on my Facebook and Instagram.
Okay.
And then the webpage, my personal webpage, is a little different.
Okay.
So that's released with Jacqui on
Yes.
Google sites. But you can get to either of those and contact me through Instagram or Facebook, and then you can also contact me through the Google site as well. And I know since I'm not normally here, there is some stuff we can do over Zoom. It's not
Oh, okay.
exactly like what you experienced, but there is a Zoom session for like the somatic emotional release with some intuitive work in there. So
Oh,
yeah, so people can still
I
get
didn't
that.
know about that one.
Yeah, I don't have to be near you to feel your thing, to feel what you're feeling in your body. I can either just
Wow.
get there and then guide you through your own session. So yeah. But
I
that's-
love it.
Yeah, so
Okay.
all options.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you again, everyone, and we will see you soon.